Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our ConsciRise consciousness course. My name is Jonathan, and today is our fourth video lecture on cultivating a daily routine that is in service of developing consciousness and living a more spiritual life. I thank you for being here and for journeying with me through the sciences of Ayurveda and yoga. Over the last few video lessons, we've talked about the science of Ayurveda, and I had mentioned at the beginning that it is the sister science to yoga, which are both systems of sciences that come from the Vedic literature originating from ancient India over 5,000 years ago. And I've gone into some detail about the science of Ayurveda, which is understood to be the science of life. And it's a health-oriented science that focuses on the physical body, but also on the mind. And today I would like to talk more about yoga, the science of yoga that complements Ayurveda. So, as I mentioned, Ayurveda and yoga are considered sister sciences, and Ayurveda is understood to be the more medical science. So it has to do with the more healthcare and physical realms of not only our body but of life. So understanding our relationship to our environment, our relationship to the mind, to the body, and how to cultivate a spiritual life within taking care of this physical vessel. And yoga is the science that focuses more on the spiritual and energetic bodies. So it focuses on the more subtle aspects of our human experience that are less physical. So it's very much considered a spiritual science. In the yogic tradition, there's actually 8 limbs of yoga as it's understood. So there's these different aspects of the yogic science that make up the totality of what we know to be yoga. And in the Western world, when we think of yoga, a lot of people think of a physical exercise routine with tight pants and a yoga mat. And that practice certainly has its place in the yoga tradition. In fact, the yoga asanas, which is the postures that people practice in yoga classes, are an important part of preparing the physical body for the more spiritual practices that come in later stages of the yoga practice. But the yoga asanas are just one part. And it's understood that there's actually 8 aspects of the yoga practice. And I want to talk a little bit about the first 3 stages or limbs, as they're called, of the yoga practice. And just to introduce all the 8 limbs of yoga, we have what's called yama and niyama, which are the first 2 limbs, which are said to be the moral codes and the self-purification protocols. And I'll dive more into that in this lesson because it's an important part of our daily routine. Our daily routine isn't just what we do, but it's how we're doing it. And so we'll touch on how we move through life that is of service to life and of service to raising consciousness. And then the third limb is the asana, the physical postures that support our consciousness and that enliven our energy by actually opening up the channels for intelligence to flow more freely. And then the fourth limb is pranayama, which is the breath control exercises that we have been introducing in these videos. And hopefully you've been practicing some of the techniques and finding techniques that work for you, that you enjoy. The benefit of offering multiple techniques this week is to hopefully inspire you to find 1 or 2 techniques that really feel like they support you on your path and to integrate that into your life. The 5th limb of yoga is called pratyahara, and that refers to detachment and turning inward from the senses. And next week and in future video lessons in this course, we'll be talking more about the mind and sound and the senses. But pratyahara is the practice of turning inward, to going inward, to discovering our true nature, which in yoga is said to be Sat, Chit, and Ananda, which is eternal, conscious, and blissful. And dharana is the 6th aspect or limb of yoga, which is focus or concentration. Dhyana, which is the extension of that concentration, is meditation. And we'll talk more about meditation in a future video. And then the ultimate goal of yoga, which is the 8th limb of yoga, is samadhi, which is understood to be ultimate union with the divine. Because ultimately, the yogic practice recognizes a divinity, a higher power, a source that orchestrates all the laws of nature that is the source of which we emanate and come from. And this is not meant to be a dogmatic video or approach or perspective. In fact, the yoga tradition is very inclusive. It's all inclusive, recognizing that there's infinite number of names that you can recognize the divine with. But ultimately, there's one source. And in modern science, it's even recognized as the unified field, which in physics is an amazing and complex concept that basically proves the existence of God. And we call it the quantum field, but it's omnipresent and all the other omni words, and essentially is the source of which all matter and forces emanate from. And this has been proven in science, and it's why I'm so fascinated with where we are going in modern science, because physics, quantum physics, it's all proving spiritual concepts through a different lens, with a different language. And yoga and Ayurveda are very similarly explaining the laws of nature and how everything works through a different lens, through a different perspective. And that's why I enjoy diving into these ancient traditions, because there's a lot of wisdom that can inform us on our spiritual path about how to interact with the world and to show up more consciously. And so, with that, I'd like to discuss the first three limbs of yoga today, starting with the yamas and niyamas. So, there's actually five yamas and five niyamas. And these are principles that we can integrate into our daily routine that inform the way that we show up, the way that we interact with other people, with our environment, and with ourselves. And that's actually what the first five yamas are. The first five yamas actually guide us on how we live our life and how we interact in our relationships in the world. That's with other people, that's with animals, that's with the earth itself, and everything that's external to us. And those five yamas are nonviolence, ahimsa, truthfulness, satya, asteya, which is non-stealing, not coveting, brahmacharya, which is control of the senses, and some people interpret that as celibacy, but I see it more as self-control. And then aparigraha, which is non-covetedness and not accumulating more than is necessary. And these five yamas are really important ways that we can navigate the world and interact with other people that not only elevate our consciousness, but elevate the collective consciousness. Because all of these principles are core values that I think we all want to see more of in the world. Non-violence, right? So focusing on how we can contribute to more non-violence in the world. And that not only means how we interact with other people, but how are we interacting with ourselves? Are we violent towards ourselves mentally? Are we hard on ourselves? Do we speak to ourselves the way that we would never speak to another human being? So this is a moral code that we can actually incorporate into our daily routine through things like affirmations. Affirmations can be a really great way to instill positive, non-violent beliefs and behaviors into our daily routine. Truthfulness, right? Honesty. And not only honesty, but authenticity, showing up as our true self and not feeling the need to lie or hide who we authentically are, which is an important part of the spiritual path, especially as we open up to our own gifts, whatever they may be, and as we start to speak our voice and our truth, right? So being open and honest about who we are and what we stand for is an important part of not only the yogic practice, but the spiritual path. Non-stealing, right? It's pretty self-explanatory, right? So not stealing, not taking what is not ours. And this also goes so far as not taking up time, right? Other people's time that we didn't get permission or consent to take up. So being considerate of other people's time and other people's energy, not taking more than we give. I think is an important way that we can live our lives. And so, including more mindfulness in our interaction with other people can really elevate our consciousness and increase our own awareness about how we're showing up in the world. And the other two yamas about celibacy, control of the senses, self-control, I think is a really great skill to cultivate. Restraint, I think there's a lot of power in resolve and restraint, not reacting to the world around us, but responding intelligently. And when we meditate, when we practice breath work, and when we ground ourselves in our experience, we can actually think more intelligently, especially when we're challenged in the world around us, to respond to those challenges intelligently as opposed to reacting to them instinctually, which can be very different types of responses and reactions. And then the last yama is just about not accumulating more than is necessary. So it's not just about living within our means. I very much love the abundance mindset, but it's also not having greed, right? It's recognizing that we're deserving and whole, and it is our birthright, right, to be abundant and to fulfill our desires and to have nice things and to have wonderful relationships. But there's a balance of not being greedy as well. So not taking and accumulating more than is necessary. And I like to take the approach that less is more, and actually embracing a minimalist perspective in many situations can be very, very freeing. Because as Biggie said, more money, more problems. And I think there's some truth to that. And then there's the niyama. So that's that second limb of yoga, which there are five as well. And this has to do with the way that we interact with ourselves and how we nurture our internal environment. The niyamas are about self-regulation, helping us maintain a positive environment from which to grow from. And that is super relevant when we're growing in our consciousness and when we're walking the spiritual path. And so these practices harness our energy to be generated from a place that's more grounded and more insightful. So the first niyama is considered cleanliness or purity. So very important that we keep ourselves clean, physically clean, but energetically clean, right? So using things like sage and Palo Santo to actually cleanse our energy field can be a really helpful practice in maintaining a clean vessel and a clean aura. And of course, bathing regularly, and things like that are really important to take care of the body. And then having satisfaction and contentment, gratitude is such an important part of cultivating a positive internal environment from which to grow from and to live in. So that is a very important thing to include in your daily routine. And what ways can you incorporate daily gratitude? A gratitude practice is a really wonderful way to remind yourself how blessed you are and how much you have to give to the world around you, whether it's your gifts, your offerings, your insight, your knowledge, or your talents. So having satisfaction, inner satisfaction and contentment, and not needing it to be necessarily from a place of needing to be validated by the world around you, but that inner knowing and cultivating that inner contentment is a big part of the spiritual practice. And incorporating that into our daily routine can really ground us in our life mission and on our path. Self-education and self-study is another really important aspect of the niyamas, because it's all about learning, right? And being receptive to learning, different approaches, different perspectives, different ways to see how the divine manifests and how everything works, and also just understanding other people and where they're coming from. But this is really about self-study and self-education. So understanding yourself in the midst of the world around you. And that can be a deep study that can lead you into all kinds of realms. There's human design. There's, of course, yoga and Ayurveda. There's Chinese medicine. There's all different ways and traditions and perspectives for learning about how we truly interact with the environment around us and how we function on all levels of our being. So exploring that, being willing to see different perspectives is a healthy part of a daily routine that enlivens our consciousness and helps us grow spiritually. And the last niyama is about devotion. And that's whatever devotion means to you. In this sense, in yoga, it's surrendering to a higher power. It's being devoted to God or devoted to source, to the universe, and letting that intelligence flow through you so you can act from that place of divine will. But whatever is your North Star that you are devoting your life to, whether it's your soul's calling or your soul mission, whatever it is, it's cultivating that sense of devotion to that, which is an important part of walking the spiritual path. And so those are the first two limbs of yoga, the yamas and niyamas. And the third limb is the asana practice. So as we are cultivating these moral codes and these self-regulatory principles, we then are ready to practice mindful movement. And the yoga asanas, the postures themselves, are actually done in a way and sequence so that they actually enliven our inner intelligence, remove blockages on a physical level so that our energy and our intelligence, our consciousness can flow more freely. And when all of that is happening, we're ready for those deeper practices that take us inward, the pranayama, the meditation, and ultimately the goal of yoga is union of body, mind, and spirit, consciousness with source. And so I hope that this offers you some inspiration or invites curiosity to learn more about the yoga practice as a whole, as there are these 8 limbs of yoga, and we'll dive into further limbs in our subsequent videos. But thank you so much for being with me today. And as a final part of this video, I want to introduce another breathing technique called Viloma pranayama, or interrupted breathing. And so this breath technique involves inhaling in steps and then exhale. So it's a inhale, inhaling in steps, and then holding for a moment and then exhale. And I like to start people off with 3. So inhale, 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 exhale, release. But you can also incorporate it in the exhale. So inhale for 3, exhale for 3. And so you can practice that, increase the steps or decrease the steps as appropriate for you. So practice this for a few minutes and see if it resonates for you. And I encourage you to journal about your experience and as well about the moral codes, the yamas and niyamas we discussed, and how you can cultivate more consciousness, more mindfulness in your daily routine, and how you interact with yourself and how you interact with the world around you from a yogic perspective. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you again soon.